The rain had been falling for hours, a steady sheet of water that turned Riverton's streets into a blur of glistening blacktop and shifting reflections. Streetlights flickered, some dimmed by years of neglect, others drowned out by the storm. On nights like this, the city seemed to fold in on itself, hiding secrets in every shadow. Detective Claire Matthews had seen her share of storms, but something about tonight carried a weight she couldn't name. Maybe it was the call that came in just past midnight, cutting through a restless attempt at sleep. The dispatcher's voice was taut, clipped. There had been a body found by the riverbank, a young woman, details too scarce to provide over the phone. Claire dressed in silence, her mind already running through possibilities. In Riverton, death was nothing new, but the way the dispatcher's voice faltered told her this wasn't ordinary. By the time she pulled her sedan into the muddy lot near the river, red and blue lights cut through the rain. Uniformed officers milled about, some directing traffic from curious onlookers who braved the storm to catch a glimpse of tragedy. Claire flashed her badge, her soaked trench coat clinging to her frame, and pushed past the tape. The body lay near the waterline, half, shielded by reeds that swayed violently in the wind. A white sheet had been draped across it, already damp from the rain. The coroner hadn't yet arrived, and the scene still bore the rawness of discovery. Officer Ramirez, young and wide-eyed, approached her. Detective Matthews, you'll want to see this one yourself. Claire crouched by the body as Ramirez lifted the sheet. The victim was a woman in her early 20s, her skin pale and waxy under the dim light. Her hair, dark and matted with river water, clung to her face, but it wasn't the drowned look that drew Claire's breath. It was the mark. Carved across the woman's collarbone, deep and deliberate, was a crimson slash, the blood smeared as though the killer had taken his time. And beneath it, almost ritualistic, was a symbol, a crude spiral drawn in what looked like lipstick, smeared but unmistakable. Claire felt her stomach tighten. Was this how she was found? Ramirez nodded nervously. Yes, ma'am. The responding officers swear no one's touched her. The mark, it wasn't done by the river. Too clean, too intentional. Claire straightened, pulling her gloves tighter. This isn't a robbery, it's a message. The words hung heavy in the air, even above the patter of rain. By 3 a.m., the coroner's van had taken the body, but the weight of the scene lingered. Claire stood beneath the overhang of an abandoned boathouse, notebook in hand, the rain dripping around her. The victim's ID identified her as Laura Bennett, 23, a student at Riverton Community College. No prior arrests, no known enemies, just another young woman whose life had ended too soon. But Claire's instincts screamed that this wasn't random. Captain Harris arrived not long after, his hulking frame silhouetted against the floodlights. He carried himself with the weariness of a man who had seen too much and cared too little. His eyes swept the scene before landing on Claire. What have we got? Claire handed him her notes. Female, early 20s. Cause of death looks like exsanguination. Bled out. There's a deliberate wound across her chest, and a symbol, a spiral. Harris's brow furrowed. Gang related? No, Claire said firmly. Too specific. Too theatrical. Whoever did this wanted to be noticed. Harris let out a grunt, pulling a cigar from his coat but not lighting it. Christ, just what this city needs. Another freak looking for headlines. As if on cue, the sound of footsteps squelched through the mud. A man in his 30s, trench coat soaked, camera slung over his shoulder, approached with a grin that didn't belong at a crime scene. Ethan Cole, Claire muttered under her breath. The journalist was a familiar nuisance. Persistent, sharp, always first on the scene with questions that cut deeper than most detectives cared to answer. He flashed a press badge, though no one had asked. Detective Matthews, Ethan said smoothly. Word travels fast when there's blood by the river. Care to comment? Claire glared at him. You're trespassing on an active crime scene. And yet here I am, Ethan replied, pulling a small recorder from his pocket. People are going to want answers. They'll want to know if Riverton has a killer stalking its streets. Turn around and walk back the way you came. Claire snapped, "Or I'll have Ramirez escort you off in cuffs." Ethan's grin faded, but his eyes glimmered with curiosity. He raised his hands in mock surrender. "Fair enough, but you'll see me again. This story has legs. I can feel it." As he retreated into the rain, Harris muttered, "Buzzards, the lot of them. You'd better keep this tight, Matthews. If word gets out too soon, panic will spread." Claire nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. The spiral, the deliberate cut, the lipstick. It wasn't random. This was ritual, and rituals don't end with one body. By dawn, Claire sat at her desk in the precinct, staring at the crime scene photos. Laura Bennett's lifeless face, the blood carved like a grotesque signature, the spiral smeared like a taunt. Something about it stirred a memory she couldn't quite place, a case file, years old, buried under dust and bureaucracy. She would have to dig. Her phone buzzed, dragging her back to the present. A voicemail notification blinked. She pressed play. At first, only static filled the line. Then a low, distorted voice, "Detective Matthews, you found her? Good. Let's see if you're clever enough to stop me before the next one." Claire froze. The message ended with a faint chuckle, metallic and cold. She replayed it twice, the chill creeping deeper each time. The killer wasn't hiding. He was watching, and he wanted her attention. That night, Riverton slept uneasily, the storm finally breaking but leaving behind streets slick with rain and fear. In a dimly lit apartment across town, a figure sat hunched over a desk. Photographs were pinned to the wall, each face crossed out with crimson paint. Laura Bennett was the latest addition, her smile frozen in time beneath the spiral scrawled across the photo. The figure leaned back, hands stained with red, and whispered to no one in particular. She saw the first shadow. Soon, they'll all see. A knife gleamed under the lamplight, freshly cleaned, ready for use. The Crimson Phantom had begun his game, and Detective Claire Matthews had just stepped onto the board. Morning crept into Riverton with an uneasy silence. The storm had passed, leaving puddles on the cracked sidewalks and a heavy mist that clung to the river like a shroud. The city went about its business, but beneath the hum of engines and chatter of pedestrians, a current of dread pulsed quietly. Word had already begun to spread. Something terrible had happened by the river. Detective Claire Matthews sat in the precinct's briefing room, coffee cooling in her hands. She had been awake nearly 30 hours, her mind racing with pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit. The recording from the killer looped in her memory, that distorted voice challenging her, mocking her. Captain Harris strode in, looking older than his years, tie loosened, cigar clenched between his teeth, though he never lit it indoors. Behind him, a projector flickered on, displaying the photo of Laura Bennett as she had been found. A hush fell over the gathered detectives. "This," Harris began, his gravelly voice filling the room, "is not just another homicide. Whoever killed Miss Bennett wants us to know it, wants the city to know it. We're treating this as a priority. One case. Matthews, your lead." Claire stood, ignoring the sting of exhaustion in her muscles. She clicked through the photos. Laura's wound, the spiral drawn in lipstick, the coroner's early notes. The cause of death is exsanguination. The wound was deliberate, precise. The spiral wasn't an afterthought. It was staged. We're not looking at a crime of passion. This is ritual. A murmur ran through the room. One younger detective muttered, "Jesus, we've got a psycho on our hands." Correction. Claire said sharply, "We've got a calculating killer. He called me directly. He's not hiding. He's inviting us to play his game." The room went still at that revelation. Harris shot her a warning glance but didn't interrupt. Claire clicked to the final slide, a close-up of the spiral. If this is what he wants us to see, then it's a symbol. The question is, why, what does it mean? Harris cut in, taking the floor again. "I don't care if he paints circles, triangles, or goddamn stick figures. Our job is to find him before he leaves another body. Matthews, I want profiles, canvassing of Laura Bennett's last 72 hours, and someone checking campus security footage. No leaks to the press. But as if summoned by the mention, the door creaked open. Ethan Cole, the reporter, leaned against the frame, notepad in hand, eyes sharp as ever. "Funny you should mention the press," he said smoothly, "because the city already knows. Half of Riverton's waking up to whispers of a river killer. If you don't give me something official, detective, the rumors will do the talking." Groans and curses filled the room. Harris bristled, but Claire raised a hand. "1 minute, Cole." She approached him, lowering her voice so only he could hear. "If you print speculation, you'll be feeding him exactly what he wants. He thrives on fear. You want your story. Help me keep this city calm." Ethan's smirk faltered for the first time, and in return, Claire said, her tone ice, "You'll get the truth, but not before I say it's ready." Ethan studied her for a beat, then tucked his notepad away. "Fair enough, but the clock's ticking, detective, and so is he." By afternoon, Claire was at Riverton Community College. The campus buzzed with tension, students huddled in nervous clusters, their eyes darting at every police cruiser parked along the quad. Laura Bennett's professors described her as quiet, diligent, with no known enemies. Her roommate was inconsolable, swearing Laura had no dark secrets. Claire wasn't convinced. She stood in Laura's dorm room, scanning the tidy space. Textbooks stacked neatly, photos pinned to a corkboard, family, friends, a smiling Laura who seemed untouched by the darkness that had found her. But as Claire sifted through the desk drawers, she found something out of place. A notebook, plain black cover, no label. Inside, scrawled across the first page in hurried handwriting, "The spiral follows me. It's everywhere, in my dreams, in the corners of buildings, even in shadows. I don't know if I'm imagining it, but I'm scared." Claire's pulse quickened. The entries continued sporadically over the last 2 months. Laura had noticed the spiral long before her death, drawn on bathroom stalls, etched into library desks, slipped into her locker. She had written of a man watching her, though she never described his face. The last entry chilled Claire to the bone. He said, "Soon I'll understand that the river washes everything clean. I don't think I can outrun him anymore." Claire snapped photos of the notebook and bagged it for evidence. The killer hadn't chosen Laura at random. He had stalked her, conditioned her with fear, and then, when the time was right, struck. That evening, back at the precinct, Claire pored over Laura's phone records. Dozens of unanswered calls to an unknown number. When traced, it led to a burner phone, purchased cash, unregistered. The trail was Cole, exactly as the killer intended. She rubbed her temples, fatigue gnawing at her. That was when Ramirez knocked on her door. "Detective, we've got something from the riverfront security cam." The grainy footage played on her monitor at 11:42 p.m. The night of Laura's murder. A figure appeared at the edge of the frame. Tall, wearing a dark hooded jacket, moving with eerie calm. He guided Laura by the arm, her body language tense, resistant. They disappeared from view near the reeds. Seconds later, the camera caught a flash of crimson in the rain, a smear across the lens as if painted with a brush. The figure had marked the camera itself. Claire leaned forward, her throat dry. He knew the cameras were there. He wanted us to see this. Ramirez swallowed hard. "Detective, he's playing with us." Claire exhaled slowly. "No, he's playing with me." A night fell again, heavy and suffocating. Claire drove home through empty streets, headlights slicing through fog. Her apartment was small, sparsely decorated, more a place to sleep than to live. She set her gun on the nightstand, peeled off her trench coat, and collapsed into bed, but sleep never came. At 2:17 a.m., her phone buzzed, another voicemail. Hands trembling, she pressed play. This time the voice was clearer. Still distorted, but almost playful. "You found her notebook. Good girl. She was my canvas, detective. But you barely touched the surface. You're chasing shadows while I paint in crimson. Listen closely. Tomorrow night, another will join her. Unless, of course, You're clever enough to stop me." A pause, then a whisper, so faint she had to replay it 3 times to hear. "The spiral is spreading." The message ended with the same chilling chuckle. Claire sat frozen, phone clutched in her hand. He knew what she'd found. He was watching her every move, and worse. He was promising another body. The echoes of the Crimson Phantom's game had only just begun. Across town, in that same dimly lit apartment, the figure prepared again. Photos lay scattered across the desk, each marked with a spiral, one face circled in red. The phantom hummed softly as he sharpened his blade. Tomorrow, the river runs crimson once more. The city of Riverton woke under the weight of dread. The news hadn't broken publicly, at least not in its full horror, but rumors had a way of spreading faster than facts. The whispers of a river killer rippled through coffee shops, across campus, and in bars where patrons lowered their voices when the subject came up. Detective Claire Matthews didn't have time for whispers. The killer's message still burned in her ears. Tomorrow night, another will join her. Tonight, she stood in the precinct's war room, maps pinned to the walls, photographs of Laura Bennett staring down at her. Spiral symbol was sketched on the whiteboard over and over, her marker strokes angrier each time she traced the curve. Officer Ramirez entered with a file. "We canvassed Laura's classmates again. One said she noticed a man hanging around campus last week. Tall, wore a black hoodie, never spoke to anyone, just watched." Claire clenched her jaw. "The Phantom. That's what people are starting to call him," Ramirez said. The Crimson Phantom. The name fit too well, and it unsettled her. Killers like him thrived on identity. Every headline, every whispered nickname fed his ego. "Keep it off the record," Claire ordered. "The more we feed his myth, the harder he'll be to stop." Ramirez hesitated. "Detective, do you really think he'll strike again tonight?" Claire's eyes locked on Laura's photo. "No, I don't think. I know." By evening, Claire had doubled patrols near the river and requested surveillance around high-risk areas, bus terminals, college dorms, abandoned buildings. The Phantom's pattern wasn't fully clear, but one thing was certain: he enjoyed water. The river was his stage, his canvas of crimson. As the sky darkened, Claire drove the length of the waterfront, headlights sweeping across warehouses, broken docks, and crumbling boathouses. Each shadow looked alive. Each reflection in the water threatened to take shape. Her phone buzzed. A text. "Unknown number. Detective, you're close, but not close enough." Her blood ran cold. She pulled over, fingers tightening around the wheel. Moments later, another text. "Look behind you." Claire spun, heart hammering. The street was empty save for the faint hum of traffic in the distance. No cars, no pedestrians, just mist curling across the pavement. Her phone buzzed again, this time an image, grainy black and white, taken through a long lens. It was her, standing beside her car, scanning the shadows. He was watching her, now. Claire drew her weapon, scanning rooftops, windows, alleys. Nothing but silence answered. The text stopped back at the precinct. Captain Harris was livid. "You should have traced the damn number." "I tried." Claire snapped. "It was routed through a proxy. He knows what he's doing." Harris jabbed a thick finger at her. "This isn't a game. You're not the only one he's baiting. He's baiting the whole Gotham City. If another body turns up tonight, it's on us." Claire bit back her retort, though the frustration burned hot. She knew Harris was right, but what he didn't understand was that the Phantom wanted her attention specifically. Every message, every move was aimed at her. "Then let me hunt him," she said, voice low. "He's watching me. That means I can watch him back." Harris shook his head. "You're too close to this, Matthews." "I'm not close enough." She shot back. The silence between them was heavy. Finally, Harris relented with a grunt. "Fine, but if this goes south, I'll have your badge." Near midnight, Claire found herself back at the river. She parked under a rusting bridge, moonlight reflecting off the water in fractured beams. The city behind her seemed to fade. Here it was just her and the shadows. She waited. Her instincts told her the Phantom would strike again, and if she could catch even a glimpse, she'd have a lead. Hours ticked by, the chill seeped into her bones, doubt crept in, then she heard it. A faint splash, too deliberate to be the river's natural current. Claire's head snapped toward the sound. From the corner of her vision, movement. A figure in a dark hoodie, tall, gliding through the reeds. Claire drew her gun. Police, stop. The figure froze for a heartbeat, then bolted toward the tree line. Claire sprinted after him, adrenaline surging. Her boots pounded against wet earth, branches slashing across her face as she pursued him deeper into the woods. The phantom was fast, naturally so, but he didn't run blindly. He led her, weaving deliberately through the forest as though he knew every inch. "Stop!" Claire shouted again, but the only response was a low chuckle echoing through the trees. Her foot caught on a root, sending her sprawling into the mud. She scrambled up, cursing, only to find the woods silent again. The figure was gone. Breath ragged, Claire pressed her back to a tree, gun raised, scanning, and then she saw it. Carved into the bark inches from her head, the spiral, fresh, crimson, glistening in the moonlight. He hadn't been running, he'd been leading her here. Back at her apartment, mud still caked on her boots, Claire collapsed into her chair. Her hands trembled as she replayed the chase in her mind. She had been so close, too close. Her phone buzzed again, another voicemail. She played it, pulse racing. This time the voice was softer, almost intimate. "You're quicker than most, detective. I felt your breath on my neck tonight. But you stumbled, you're not ready. The hunt is only beginning." A pause, then chillingly, "Next time you won't just find a body, you'll find a message, one meant for you alone." The message ended. Claire sat in the dark, gun resting on her thigh, staring at the spiral she had scribbled on her notepad earlier. For the first time, doubt gnawed at her resolve. The phantom wasn't just hunting victims, he was hunting her. Across the river, in the killer's lair, the crimson phantom pinned another photograph to the wall. Not of a random victim, not of a stranger, it was Claire Matthews. A crimson spiral marked across her face. The hunter had become the hunted detective. Claire Matthews hadn't slept in days. Her reflection in the precinct bathroom mirror looked like a stranger, eyes shadowed, hair tied in a hasty knot, her face drawn tight from fatigue. She splashed cold water over her skin, but it did little to wash away the echo of the phantom's last message. "Next time, you won't just find a body, you'll find a message, one meant for you alone." The thought gnawed at her. He wasn't just playing games with the city. He was speaking directly to her. Every move was a taunt, a dare. And worse, she felt the weight of inevitability. Another body was coming. By noon, the call came in. A jogger had stumbled upon a body in Riverside Park. Claire and Ramirez raced to the scene, sirens wailing. The moment she stepped out of the car, her gut twisted. Something about the stillness in the park, the way the trees seemed to lean in, made her skin crawl. The victim was a man this time. Early 30s, clean, cut, dressed in running gear. His throat had been slit, the wound surgical, but the phantom had escalated. On the man's chest was a spiral carved so deep it seemed to twist into the bone. Pinned to his shirt was an envelope, sealed with crimson wax. Claire pulled on gloves and opened it carefully. Inside was a single Polaroid photograph. She froze. It wasn't of the victim, it was of her. Claire standing outside the precinct 2 days earlier, coffee in hand, unaware she was being watched. On the back of the photo, written in smeared red ink, "You and I are bound, detective, blood remembers." Claire's stomach dropped. She turned the envelope over, half expecting another message, and there it was, a name, scrawled in the same ink. For Emma, the world tilted for a moment. She staggered back, breath caught in her throat. Emma, her sister, years fell away in an instant. Claire was 16 again, sirens wailing outside her childhood home. Emma, only 12, had been found lifeless in her bedroom. The killer had never been caught. The case had gone cold. Claire had built her entire career on that night, on the promise she'd never let another family endure what hers had. She hadn't spoken Emma's name aloud in years, burying the memory deep where it couldn't break her. And now, the phantom had dug it up. Captain Harris paced as Claire laid out the evidence back at the precinct. "This changes everything. If this son of a bitch has a connection to your past," Claire cut him off. It's not just a connection, he knows. He knows about Emma. Ramirez frowned, but how? That case was sealed. Only family and lead detectives had access. Claire's hands shook as she flipped through Emma's old file, pulled hastily from archives. Unless he was there, unless he's someone who touched the case years ago. A witness, a neighbor, maybe even a rookie cop. Harris slammed his fist on the table. If that's true, then this bastard's been planning for decades. Claire stared at the spiral photos, heart pounding. Not decades, he's been waiting for me. This isn't about random victims. It's about finishing what he started. That night, Claire sat alone in her apartment, the city lights flickering through the blinds. Emma's face stared back at her from an old photo album she hadn't touched in years. Bright smile, freckles, a childhood cut short. Her phone buzzed again, another voicemail. She pressed play with trembling hands. This time, the voice was calm, almost tender. Emma was the first. Do you remember, Claire? Of course you do. You've buried her all these years, buried the truth with her. But blood doesn't forget. Blood remembers. You were meant to find me then, but you weren't ready. Now you are. The voice dropped to a whisper. You're not chasing me. You're chasing yourself. Claire's chest tightened, her breath shallow. The message ended with the same haunting chuckle. She hurled the phone across the room, the screen shattering against the wall. Her hands curled into fists, rage boiling inside. For years, Emma's death had been her ghost, her reason for becoming a detective, and now the phantom claimed responsibility. Whether it was true or manipulation, she couldn't tell. But if he had killed Emma, then this wasn't just about duty anymore. It was personal. 2 a.m. The precinct's war room buzzed with activity as Claire pulled every file connected to Emma's murder. Names of suspects, alibis, dead ends. One name jumped out, Daniel Cross. A neighbor at the time, 20 years old, questioned and released for lack of evidence. He'd disappeared not long after, no forwarding address. Claire slammed the file on the table. Find him now. Ramirez worked the database, fingers flying. Minutes later, he pulled up a record. Cross resurfaced 5 years ago. Changed his name to Daniel Hartman. Arrested once for trespassing. Charges dropped. Current residence, Riverton's East End. Claire's pulse quickened. The East End, where the spiral graffiti had been spotted, where the first body was found. She grabbed her coat and weapon. We're bringing him in. Hartman's building was a decaying tenement, the kind where shadows lingered even under harsh streetlights. Claire and Ramirez climbed the stairs, weapons drawn, hearts pounding. Apartment 3B. Claire kicked the door open. The stench hit fur. Rotting food mildew, something metallic beneath it all. The walls were covered in spirals, drawn in crimson paint, some smeared with handprints. On a table sat a Polaroid camera. Dozens of photos littered the floor. Victims, Laura Bennett, the jogger, and Claire herself, captured from angles she never knew she'd been watched, but Hartman was gone. On the wall above the table, written in dripping red paint, "Too slow, Claire, blood calls to blood." Claire's knees nearly buckled. He had been here, watching her, waiting, and now he was out there again, hunting his next victim. Across town, the Crimson Phantom hummed as he prepared his next scene. He pinned a new photo to the wall, not Laura, not the jogger, Emma, and beside it, a photo of Claire, 2 sisters, 2 spirals. One destiny, the Phantom's blade glistened as he whispered, "Blood remembers." Riverton was silent that night, but it wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence before a storm. Detective Claire Matthews sat alone in her car across from the East End warehouses, engine off, breath fogging the windshield. Her eyes scanned the shadows, the skeletal remains of industry where the Phantom had made his playground. The words on the tenement wall echoed in her head. "Too slow, Claire. Blood calls to blood." Her sister's name, the spirals, the photographs. It all pointed here, to this part of the city. He was drawing her in. And she was ready. Captain Harris had wanted to flood the area with uniforms, but Claire refused. That's what he wants. An audience. This has to be between me and him. Harris had looked at her hard, his cigar clenched tight. "You sure this is about justice, Matthews, or is this about revenge?" She hadn't answered, because she didn't know. The warehouse loomed ahead, its broken windows like jagged teeth. Claire gripped her weapon and pushed inside, her flashlight cutting across stacks of rusted machinery. The air was thick with dust and decay and spirals. They were everywhere, painted on walls, etched into concrete, drawn in crimson across the floor. Her beam landed on a figure standing in the center of the vast room. Tall, cloaked in a dark hood, his back to her, Daniel Cross, Claire called, voice steady though her pulse thundered. The figure chuckled low. "You still think that's who I am?" He turned slowly, lowering his hood. Claire's breath caught. His face was older, harder, but unmistakable. "Daniel Hartman, you killed Emma," she said, the words cracking like a whip. He tilted his head, eyes gleaming with twisted delight. "Emma was the beginning, the first brushstroke of my masterpiece, and you were the audience I needed. You've been chasing me your whole life, Claire, even before you knew my name." Her grip on her gun tightened. "Why her? She was 12, just a child." Hartman's smile widened. "Because innocence is the purest canvas, and because I wanted to see what it would do to you. Would you crumble, or would you rise? You rose, detective. You became my perfect adversary." Claire's stomach turned. This was never about them, was it? Laura, the jogger. They were just pieces. This has always been about me. Hartman spread his arms, as though presenting an art gallery. "Exactly. Every spiral, every message, every body. It was all to bring you here, to make you see the truth. We're bound by blood. Your sister's blood, my blood. All of it swirls together in the spiral. You and I are the same." Claire's voice dropped to a whisper. "No, we're nothing alike." Hartman's grin faltered, but only for a moment. He pulled a knife from his coat, its blade gleaming in the dim light. "Prove it." The chase erupted in an instant. Hartman lunged, blade flashing. Claire fired, but he slipped behind a column, the shot sparking harmlessly against metal. The warehouse echoed with the clash of hunter and hunted. Claire moved cautiously, gun raised, flashlight beam slicing through the dark. Every step crunched on broken glass, each sound magnified. "Do you feel it, Claire?" Hartman's voice bounced off the walls. "The thrill, the connection. You're not chasing justice. You're chasing me, just as I've chased you." She spun at a sound behind her. Too late. Hartman slammed into her, the knife slashing across her sleeve, grazing skin. She fell hard, gun skidding across the floor. Pain seared her arm, but adrenaline surged. She kicked out, catching him in the knee. He stumbled, giving her a chance to scramble for her weapon. He came at her again, blade raised. This time, she was ready. She fired. The shot rang out, deafening in the cavernous space. Hartman staggered, blood blooming across his chest. But he laughed even as he fell to one knee. "Good, very good." He gasped. "You've completed the spiral, Claire, from Emma to you. It always had to end like this." He collapsed, the knife clattering from his hand, blood pooling beneath him. Claire stood trembling, gun still raised, chest heaving. Her mind screamed at her to finish it, to end the monster who had haunted her life. But another voice, Emma's voice, faint but steady, whispered from memory, "Don't let him take you with him." Slowly, Claire lowered her gun. By dawn, the warehouse was swarming with officers. Hartman's body was bagged, the spirals photographed, the crime scene catalogued, but none of it mattered to Claire. The moment the sheet covered his face, it felt as if 20 years of weight pressed down on her chest. Harris approached quietly. "It's over." Claire shook her head. "No, it'll never be over. Not for me." He studied her, then placed a heavy hand on her shoulder. "Maybe not, but for this city it is. You gave Riverton back its nights." She didn't reply. She wasn't sure she believed him. Later, alone in her apartment, Claire finally opened the old photo album again. Emma's face smiled up at her. Forever 12, forever lost. Tears came, hot, unstoppable, cleansing. For the first time in years, she let herself grieve, but as she closed the album, her phone buzzed. A message, unknown number. The spiral never ends. Claire's breath hitched. Was it a copycat, a disciple, or had the phantom somehow planned beyond his own death? She stared out the window as the city lights flickered in the distance. The hunt might be over, but the shadows of crimson would never truly fade. Please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.